episode of the Love Your Life show. I am so thrilled to bring this interview to you today. I had the opportunity to interview Jen Sweeney. She is an author, an entrepreneur, and she is passionate about patient advocacy. We had an amazing conversation on the show. She wrote this book, which is what got me interested initially in having her on the show. You've got to be kidding me. Perimenopause, Symptoms, Stages, and Strategies, because she was frustrated by the lack of information and support women receive in perimenopause. So she researched and wrote this book. She launched Periwinkle, which is a movement to help women thrive in midlife. And there's so much more. She's a frequent speaker on healthcare issues. She believes women deserve information, support, and evidence-based care in perimenopause and beyond. And she's just a perfect guest for our show, for all of us looking to empower ourselves so that we can shine our light out more. Let's go, warriors. Welcome to the show, Jen. We are thrilled to have you on the Love Your Life show.
Thank you so much, Susie. It's wonderful to be here. I've been following you on social media and I've been listening to your podcast. I love your content and I'm super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're a super good fit for this show, and the whole premise that we're trying to help as many women as we can live lives they love, and your whole background and current experience really is something that I wanted to bring to the listeners. So thank you so much for being on here. And speaking of, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So speaking about women and loving your life, I actually have 2 women's studies degrees. I went all in on women early on, both for undergraduate and for my graduate degree here at GW University. I have been a patient advocate now for about 20 years. I run a virtual company called X4 Health, and our specialty is designing and leading social impact campaigns. I'm also a trained leadership coach and spent many years supporting women in nonprofits to step into leadership roles. So that's a little bit about my career and my background.
Oh, it's so neat. And I admire women like you who got right into it, as you said, with, the degrees and all of that. I was a little later to the game. And I love learning from people like you. So thank you for coming on. Can you tell us a little bit about what led you to write the book that I have behind me if people are watching on YouTube, but the Perimenopause Survival Guide?
Sure. So what I didn't know coming into all of this was that, by 2025, so a couple of years from now, 1 billion women will have gone into perimenopause around the planet. And
wow.
At the time I was transitioning into perimenopause, I would never have had that clue because nobody was talking about perimenopause. It was not even a term that I was familiar with, which is, shocking to me now, but at the time had no idea. I also didn't know that perimenopause can last up to 15 years, which is a really long period of time for someone who has no idea that it's coming. So when I transitioned into perimenopause, which is a number of years ago now, I found that transition really challenging. I had significant emotional symptoms. I had significant physical symptoms, and they really came on without any warning. So, one day I was at the top of my game, professionally and personally. I loved my life, going back to the title of this podcast. And the next, I was literally sitting down with my business partners and my husband, and I was saying, I think there's something really wrong with me. I think I need to retire. And that was very scary for me. So I dove in, tried to figure out, everything I possibly could learn about what I was going through. And what I said to myself at the time was, if I can figure this out, I will do everything in my power to make sure other women don't find themselves as clueless as I was. So that's why I wrote the guide.
It's so helpful. I very much was struck by your dedication in the beginning too. And it says this guide is dedicated to my daughter, Hadley, and to her peers. May they and all future generations of girls and women have access to information and healthcare services that help them care for their bodies and thrive. May they live in cultures that respect their reproductive and sexual health. I love that. I love, and just your quest, and that, you've had this experience, and sort of now, how do you help so that other women do not have this surprising and scary, it sounds like, experience also. So what do you wish, like, what do you wish people that you had known about perimenopause, or sort of, what are 4 or 5 things that you wish you had known about perimenopause and you want to teach people about perimenopause, um, that you wish that you had known before it began for you? If I can form a complete sentence. Possibly brain fog, Jen.
Oh, I know. Listen, I know all about it. So, I mean, I think the basic thing I would like people to know is that perimenopause even is a thing.
Yeah.
I really had never heard the term. I did not know it was a significant stage of life. I had heard about menopause, but I didn't even really know what that was. And to me, that felt really far away. Like when I was in my 30s, after having my kids, I heard the word perimenopause, or heard the word menopause, and thought that was okay when I'm, 65, 70. Even then, I did not have a clue. So I think the first thing I would hope is that people would know that this is a term and that this is a significant stage of life. I wish that people had told me, or someone, or, I wish I'd had a clue that you can begin to experience shifts in your hormones and in your physical and emotional health in your late 30s. Like I had no idea what was coming down the pike for me. And if I had, I think I would have been more prepared. I would have gone, oh gosh, this is normal. This is a stage of life that, women go through. So that would be number 2. Susie, I really wish someone had told me that perimenopause can affect emotional health. I had no idea. And as I did the research for the guide, one of the things that shocked me is if you have ever experienced anxiety or depression at any time in your life, and I had postpartum depression with my first child, you are 60% at risk of experiencing anxiety or depression in perimenopause, which is, that's an incredible risk. And the fact that all of us are walking around having no idea that as we head toward the stage of life, we could have a significant dip in our emotional health. That to me is shocking. So I wish someone had told me that. This is a big one. I wish someone had told me not to undereat and overexercise. As my metabolism shifted in my late 30s, early 40s, I was like, oh, this is a problem with me. I must be doing something wrong. I'm not exercising enough. I'm not, I'm eating too much, which was completely not true. Actually, looking back, it was a complete shift in my metabolism due to my hormones, which happens to most women. And I made a big mistake. I started eating less and I started exercising like nobody's business. I've always loved exercise, but I was using exercise almost as honestly, as a punishment. And looking back, I think there's a temptation to do that. Like, oh my gosh, like I can't eat as much as I used to, so I'll just cut back. Or the only way I can eat, as much as I'd like to is to exercise more. And in my case, that did some pretty significant damage to my adrenal glands. And I became so exhausted. And I've had to really build myself back up from that stage of life. And I would not want to see anyone else do that. So those would be the top 4, I would say, for myself.
Yeah, I want to return to each and every one. They're all very juicy. And I really appreciate you speaking to them. I mean, first off, just knowing, that quest to you wish someone had told you that this could have shown up in, our mid to late 30s, and not knowing is part of that sort of crazy making. And I think most women out there listening will have had this experience where maybe we're feeling a little moody, or all of a sudden we want all the chocolate, or we're just like, what is wrong with me? And then, a couple hours or the next day you go and you're like, oh, I got my period, and then there's just this relaxation, like, oh, I'm not crazy after all. Like, oh, because our brain just likes meaning. It's like, why is this happening? And when we can say that, that happens most months, and it's like, it's that experience of like, oh my gosh, okay, of course, then, having that sort of knowledge with perimenopause and moving into this period with and just this lack of knowledge that we have as a society, certainly more back when you were going into it, and still now, of what does it mean, what's going on. I think we really are in an age of discovery, where it's like almost every week I hear something new of, to your point that, anxiety can peak with menopause, or, oh, joint pain, or, oh, all these different things. And when we know, the more we know, the more we can do about it. So I really appreciate that sort of just shining the light here on what perimenopause is, and the experience of it is helpful.
Yeah, and I'll share just one other thought on that. The part that blows me away is when I was preparing to have a family, I did all of this preparation, the whole, 9 months that you get to prepare before you have
Right.
a child, if you're pregnant yourself, or perhaps you're going through an adoption journey, and that in itself might take some time. And it never occurred to me to just like walk into it. I
Mhm.
prepared, I
Right.
had this 9 months to make sure that my nursery was okay, and, took care of myself health wise. But nobody says to you in your late 30s, hey, there's a couple things you want to probably shore up now as you're heading into a period of life in which your hormones are going to take a significant hit.
Mhm.
So I would love to see women, reading this guide and starting to talk with their clinicians at the end of their 30s and into their early 40s, because then you'll feel prepared for it. You'll know what to look for, and you'll know what to talk with your clinician about. So yeah, I wish that had been the case for me, but hopefully other women can benefit now.
Yeah, I mean, I love, and I like your approach too, of like, learn about it from an empowering place, not a like, oh my God, this is coming place, because it is in that knowing, and in that sort of normalizing things, that our brain and our nervous system can find relief. And just, with pregnancy, you get some weird, it's funny you mentioned that, because it is sort of similar. You get some weird symptom and they're like, oh yeah, that's normal. And you're like, oh, okay.
Oh, good
Of
to
course.
know.
I didn't think that would be normal. Or, and I find I work with lots of parents of teens, and how to raise teens. And when they think something's wrong because their teen is in their room the whole day. And, for me to be able to normalize that and say, no, that is a perfectly normal stage of their development. It just calms everything. And then we can deal with what's going on. So in the same way for perimenopause, to just settle us down and be like, yeah, that's totally normal. And now, what do you want to do about it? Like, how do you bring this to your doctor? How do you move forward? And then that goes to one of your other points of the mental health and the anxiety and depression. I did not link anxiety. For me, I've experienced anxiety in my past, and I'm in the middle of perimenopause and all the experiences that brings. And I'm definitely noticed an increased level of anxiety sort of in my normal PMS, MS period. And once reading your book and guides like it, it sort of helps me see like, oh, this is normal. It doesn't mean I have to suck it up and deal with it, but it is that like, oh, okay, I'm not going crazy. So at least I can sort of attribute it to perimenopause. And then that directs me in what I can do to best care for myself. I really like your, bringing to focus the mental and emotional health piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that our progesterone continues to decrease as we get older, and progesterone is our happy hormone. It's the hormone that makes us feel good. It can also be the love hormone. And, the first hint for me that there was like a problem out there was I wasn't sleeping at night. Or
Mm.
I'd fall asleep and then I'd wake up in the middle of the night. And that's because my progesterone was depleting. I was losing progesterone, which is, again, this completely natural thing that happens.
Mhm.
But had I known, I kept on thinking, gosh, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I not able
Yeah.
to sleep through the night? So just having that awareness, and then recognizing that it's perfectly normal, and gives you an opportunity then to bring it to your clinician. And this actually leads to one other thing that I didn't say in terms of things that I wish I had known about, but I feel so strongly about this, Susie. As I mentioned at the top of this conversation, I got 2 degrees in women's studies. So I'm pretty, in the know when it comes to women's issues. But the last I had heard about hormone therapy was back in like the 2000s, right before I had my first child. And what I had read at the time was that hormone therapy was incredibly dangerous and could lead to breast cancer and lots of other healthcare issues. And I had that tucked away in the back of my head. And I remember thinking, okay, well, those are important clinical guidelines to be aware of. So when I started to enter into perimenopause, that was very firmly rooted in my subconscious and in my consciousness
Yeah.
that, oh my gosh, don't ever go near hormone therapy. And what I learned during the course of writing this guide is mind-blowing, which is that that study was flawed in many, many ways, and I
Very
go into
flawed.
that in the guide. And really, there has not been a transformative like update to
Mhm.
women in popular culture about the fact that that study was flawed, and that in fact hormone therapy can be very safe and effective and is highly, highly suggested for many women around the world.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, here in the US, hormone therapy usage tanked right after that study came out,
Mhm.
has still not gone back to the rates at which most other industrialized nations use it. And again, I just wish someone had told me.
Yeah. Well, you are telling people, and I'm really appreciative of that because I was the same way. It's like I grabbed hold of that. I don't even think I, even read an entire article on the whole study, but I grabbed hold of that one tidbit and was like, okay, hormone replacement off for me. And then here I am 10, 20 years later, like, oh, wait a minute, let me see. Actually, it might be in and probably is in my best interest to get on some hormone therapy to protect my heart and protect my brain and to, make all the other things we do to set ourselves up for wellness, to just sort of replace the negativity we had with that study and hormone replacement therapy in a more positive camp. I really appreciate that. And for listeners, again, another reason to get your book, another reason to look into Periwinkle, and also to look at other countries and how they're doing it. I know the UK does a tremendous job with this. It's just much more accepted. Here I find when I'm talking to women, there's even a layer of shame around it. Like, yeah, I'm doing this thing, like it's like, okay, let's bring that a little more into the awareness that that's really can be a very healthy, proactive step to help us as women move into this next, stage of our lives where we can have a wonderful upgrade to our standard of living.
Yeah, it's so funny. Well, it's actually, again, mind blowing to me. Currently in the UK, there is a shortage of hormone therapy.
I saw that.
And women are up in arms. They are going to Parliament and demanding that this hormone therapy, which happens to be fully covered in the UK, unlike
Yeah.
here in the US, which is often not the case. And yet here, it's like you said, it's almost whispered about. Maybe if you're fortunate to even have heard about it. And I want to go back. You mentioned Periwinkle, and I can share a little bit of background on that if it's helpful.
Yes, please.
So I got to the end of writing this guide and I felt really good. I was like, okay, I've achieved one of my goals, which was to raise awareness about perimenopause and to provide women with information about this significant stage of life. And I felt really good. But I remember I was actually sitting here in this office and I was like, I don't feel like I'm done yet. And there were two pieces that felt still left to be done. The first is creating community around this stage of life. I think back to what we were talking about earlier, when you first are becoming a parent, you join parenting groups or play groups, and then you meet your kids' friends' parents, through the elementary school. And you sort of have pretty quickly this built-in network of
Oh,
support to go, hey, is your kid having like 5 tantrums a day, or is it just mine?
and a bond. Like, how do you get through 3 hours of sleep?
Yes. And that, I mean, to this day, I still have many friends
Mm.
from those stages of life who mean so much to me because we were all going through this same stage at the same time. I would love to see that happen with Periwinkle. I really believe that there is wonderful things that can come out of us sharing with each other our individual experiences, sharing the wisdom that we get along the way. I mean, I look at my mother and her generation, and not only did they not talk about this, they certainly did not go to each other for support. And I feel like we can do better. I feel like we can
Oh.
talk about these things now. We can share support. So that's one thing I'm hoping will happen with Periwinkle. The second piece is, I mentioned at the top of our conversation that, I've been working in healthcare for 20 years. I work with lots of clinicians. I had no idea that the vast majority, I mean, like 95% of clinicians receive no education and no training on women's health issues post-reproduction. None.
Oh,
And
it
we can do
drives
better.
me insane.
We can do better. And it's funny because I work with all of these clinicians and they say to me, Jen, particularly primary care clinicians, when my patients come in and they have these questions, I've never been trained on this. I've never studied it. It wasn't part of my medical education. So I know they too want to provide this information. They want this knowledge, and they want to be able to
they've been trained on things that not everyone's going to go through, diabetes and hypertension and high blood, and yet we know that if you were a female and you live past a certain, you're going to go through this, and it's not part of their training. It is criminal to me. Yes.
50% of the population. It's really, I think
it's a guaranteed. Like it's not like, oh, you might go through menopause. Like we do. we
all do. Yes. So I think I'm looking forward with Periwinkle to really work with the medical community and figure out, okay, how do we take our experiences and translate that into medical education? How do we take our experiences, translate that into more research on great treatments? How do we take our experience with treatments that exist now to improve them over time? Again, because I truly do not want my daughter, who is 18 today, in 30 years from now, to be dealing with the same lack of information, lack of knowledge, and lack of treatment. We really do need to improve things. So those are my big goals for Periwinkle, and I hope folks will go to the Hello Periwinkle website. I know you'll put it in your show notes. One of the other things folks can do is, if they go to the website and they click on the publisher's link, which is called Book Baby for the guide, they can get a 25% discount on the guide, either the Kindle or the soft copies. This is just for your listeners, and I hope they'll take advantage of it.
Yes, I will definitely put that like direct link and then the link to Periwinkle. And can you dive a little deeper? Like, what is Periwinkle? Because I know what it is, but we haven't touched on that exactly. So, you just mentioned it's a website, but what might they find there?
Yeah, so there's a number of things. So first, we have lots of different blogs that dive deeply into lots of different topics around perimenopause. So, why might you be not sleeping right now? What are some of the weird symptoms that you might be experiencing in perimenopause? If you actually type in weird symptoms of perimenopause, it's like one of the top searches for Google, because nobody's talking about this. And
there's a mass amount of us that are having this experience that doctors haven't been educated on. Yes,
exactly. So there's blogs that deal with the weird symptoms, some of the vitamins and supplements that are helpful. I write a lot about that in the guide as well. We also have Periwinkle readers who will reach out to us with questions, then we'll answer those as well. I should point out, as I think this is very clear, but just want to make sure, I am not a clinician in any way, shape, or form. But I did have a clinician review the guide for clinical accuracy, and I will reach out to clinicians if there's a question like that has a clinical base that I can't answer. So we'll answer questions there. And then, I'm letting this evolve organically. I think we'll see. Perhaps there will be a special section on the website for that support that I talked about earlier. If people are interested in the community, we'll build it. We send out, we have been sending out monthly newsletters with certain topics. Right now, this month, we're dealing with stress and overwhelm. Since everybody
I don't know what you're talking about.
With, I know, is like stressed and overwhelmed. And in perimenopause, it makes it even harder. Yeah. So you can sign up for our newsletter there. And like I said, we'll see how things evolve.
I think this is how we start to make a change, so that our daughters and the younger generation are not in the same place, is that we do start speaking up, and we do start visiting websites like Hello Periwinkle and joining in the discussion and normalizing it and speaking up. There are so many of us going through these things, and if we are not speaking up about it and having that hush hush place, it's really unhelpful. And that's something that I think your book does a wonderful job with. There are so many, if listeners are watching, I have so many sticky notes in here, because you have so many resources in the book of websites or specific recommendations on which tests to get and which, supplements can be helpful. And you are very honest and transparent that you're not a clinician, but it is just this, like, let's come together. It's similar to that, like, when we first had kids, it's like, come on together on the playground and let's talk about what's going on, so that when when women share their experiences, the experiences are shared, and we normalize it, and we feel more connected. And it is, that's where we need to go with women's health. There is so much happening now, even in the last, I'd say 5 years, with awareness of, when we are still cycling in our infradian cycle, and what those 4 different stages mean, that we don't go through the same 24-hour cycle like men. Like, we have women's bodies, and the more we can bring that attention to the forefront it's going to be helpful. One thing that I loved in your book that you brought up, it was page 23, you bring up how that bad PMS is a sign that our hormones are not in balance versus it's just a normal sign of being a girl or a woman. And if we're not talking about that, people very much, teenagers, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds are just, you get that idea. It's like, oh, just suck it up, right? We hear cramps. Okay, this is bad. And we get that like internal shame, whereas something it's quite normal. And the more we talk about it, and the less we think is something wrong with me, we're able to say, like, we're able to reach out to the appropriate care team or, you as a coach and guide for women. It's super helpful. So I love that you have Hello Periwinkle there. I love that you have this book out there. I want listeners to listen in. I would like to touch back to how you were talking about exercise, and because that is one of the things that we really have been trained to sort of go hard or go home. And, when a lot of my listeners, we were raised in that, like, step aerobics, exercise hard every day, and really cardio is king. And this, you mentioned the word punitive. It's like, yeah, you can have the Sunday, but you better go out for that high impact exercise the next day. And I would love to hear some of your guidance and what you've learned about exercise and eating in relation to the female body, with specifically towards perimenopause and beyond.
Yeah, and I think I'll even take it a little bit more broadly and just say I'm learning during this stage of life to hold myself gently. Not even just in the perimenopause stage, but in the stage of life, just turned 50. So I'm going to call that midlife. I feel this, real desire to nurture myself and to, again, hold myself just almost like in a constant hug. So whereas in the beginning of perimenopause, I had this urge to, over exercise and under eat. Now I'm thinking to myself, what can I do to nourish myself? And for me, a lot of times that's stretching. You talked about joint pain earlier. Unfortunately for me, while I've been going through perimenopause, I was also diagnosed as hypothyroid, which often will result in joint pain. And just as a heads up to anyone listening out there who is potentially in perimenopause right now, many, many women are hypothyroid during perimenopause, but they do not know it because a lot of the symptoms overlap. And I have found that more so than anything, I need to care for my joints, get rid of any inflammation in my body. And I do that through yoga, I do that through Pilates, and I do that through stretching. Whereas, there have been large periods of time in my life where that just felt like a waste of time. Like, what am I doing? I'm not getting the quote unquote endorphins. And I have now find it's non-negotiable. I can't
calorie
really
burn. Yeah. It's like, right. Yeah.
Right. But I can't actually do the calorie burn unless I have gotten the inflammation out of my body, whether that's through, foam rolling or stretching. So that has been really big for me. In terms of fitness or in terms of food and nutrition, I've always been a fairly good eater. I grew up with a mother who frankly was like this hippie who grew all of our own food and, just taught us really early about nutrition. So it hasn't necessarily been, I haven't shifted what I eat, but I do think a lot now about building in certain vegetables as a way to help my body eliminate estrogen. So we talked earlier about, bad PMS. Turns out all those years in which I had bad PMS, I actually had estrogen dominance. I had too much estrogen in my body compared to progesterone and testosterone, which is like not a horrible thing. I mean, except that for me, I did end up having, some pretty bad PMS, and I've had some bad symptoms as a result during perimenopause. There's a couple ways to deal with that. One is to eat lots of cruciferous vegetables. That has helped me a lot. And the second is to sweat because your body needs to detox and like let out, some of these hormones, in particular, the estrogen. So I'll do saunas. I'll make sure that, I'm taking hot baths all the time with Epsom salts. Those help a lot. And again, that goes back to, that also nourishes me. Like, who doesn't want a lovely hot bath at the end of the day? So rather than go all the time, I do find myself saying, okay, more sleep, more hot baths, and more stretching and flexibility work. And those have made me a lot happier and more calm and just able to deal with this period of life better.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is sort of the beauty of midlife and beyond. I think when we get that, I know that we were speaking of how progesterone can be helpful for many things, but also lowering that progesterone, we sort of get out of this people pleasing mode and caring what everyone else thinks. And then we often either due to necessity because we are in such pain, or because we're sort of reaching this midlife and we're like, well, what about me? Like, who's going to take care of me? We get to this part where we do start to turn and be more comforting to us. I love that idea and thinking about what we need. And I'm thrilled to hear that you did not have an experience of, punishment with food or exercise when you're growing up. I think many of my listeners did. I certainly did. And that led to me disconnecting from my body. So at times it's hard for me. Like you said, that you have to do the foam rolling before you can do the hard exercise. It's like, I sort of would get to that mental place where it was like two beings. Like part of me is like, oh my God, I'm in such pain. But the other part is like, yeah, you deserve it. You need to. And so part of this, your movement that I appreciate so much is helping girls your daughter's age and up just realize everything we do, let's start to have it from this more nurturing thing, to really look at, sure, there might be a day where a high intense workout feels wonderful to you, go at it. And then there might be a day where just stretching and having some music on it feels wonderful, go at that. And adding in there also that I love, Dr. Amen is a neuroscientist, he's I don't know, brain surgeon dude, but he has a saying that says, love food that loves you back. And I, that to me is something that comes up for me. Like in the moment, it might, my brain might be like, oh yeah, I have 3 cupcakes, but I'm like, okay, is this going to love me back? Is this going to help me sleep through the night? Is this going to raise my anxiety? Is this, and really reframing it from this punitive place of, how many calories are in it or what that's going to do, whatever, into a more, is this something like cruciferous vegetables are going to help me get rid of some of my extra estrogen? Is this something that's going to help, me feel better? Is this something that when I eat it, my stomach does feel good? Having, this is all, it all goes back to your background in advocacy, really, like, advocating for others, but then also advocating for ourselves.
Yeah, I want to see all of us in this time of life double down on ourselves. I spent so many years investing my time and energy into my family, not just my kids, but my relationship with my husband, with my parents. I've always adored being their daughter. I have wonderful sisters, always, really invested all this time and energy into all of these other people. And that's not to say that I'm going to stop doing that. They're
Right.
still a huge part of my life and I adore them. And I really want to see, what does life look and feel like when I'm doubling down on me? And what I've found so far, I'm still very early in this journey, but in the short time that I've been doing this, I'm finding that the people I love that. They are excited for me.
Yes.
They see me as more more fulfilled and happier in the work that I do. There were times in my life where I was giving to everyone else, and honestly, I wasn't very happy about it. And I thought I was hiding it, but I don't think I was. I think they could tell, like, mom's a little ticked off right now.
Yeah.
So, and I also think, given how much change happens in our bodies during the stage of life, for the vast majority of women, I do think we should carve out some time and space to go through that in a way that isn't painful. Do whatever we can do to make it easier on ourselves. Like, whether that means having other people, tag in when you're exhausted, or whether that means cutting back a little bit on the responsibilities that you have. I've done that. And, I thought at certain points, oh gosh, the world is going to come to an end. Guess what? It didn't.
Right.
And, I'm getting the sleep that I need to get through this period of time. I'm nurturing myself in the ways that I think are important. And so far, everything is going okay. So I'm hoping I can continue it. And I hope some of your listeners will be able to as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that is the secret to life. I don't think, that us being here and caring for everyone else's needs and goals and drives is what we're here for, that we are here to dig into being more of ourselves. And the more we can care for ourselves, the more we can be ourselves. And then that does shine out to those who truly love us. There might be people who we've been in relationship with who are used to us sort of being in that over functioning role and doing it for them, and skipping our stretching session or whatever so that we could drive them to say, whatever, and they might be a little unhappy, and that's okay. I think that's also where midlife is, just really looking at the life that we're living, making sure that it's in alignment with our values, because those values are given to us as an important, sort of compass for the life we want to be living, and then recognizing that shines out. That is, it's sort of the definition between codependency and interdependency, but I am 100% a better mother, a better wife, a better friend when I am taking care of myself first, from I call it a soulfish place, like not selfish.
I love that.
But yeah, it's when I'm feeding my soul the things that I'm full of, and then I have so much more to shine out on everyone else. I love it. Oprah, I think, is the one who said, either Oprah or Toni Morrison said, you don't give from your cup, you give from the overfull fill of your cup that's on the saucer. Like, so you fill your cup up so high that it's overflowing in that like ooze and love of yourself and care of yourself. And then you get to give from the saucer and everybody wins.
Wow.
Whereas I know I spent the first 30 years of my life like giving from 2 drips at the bottom of my open, my empty, broken cup.
Right. I'm with you. I did the same thing for sure.
Yeah. And that's, there's a place where we're like just trying so hard for our worthiness and helping everyone else and falling into these sort of societal patterns. And I think so much of the beauty in midlife and perimenopause into this menopause is this coming into ourselves. One of the most beautiful things I heard about the whole sort of female journey was, when you first start your bleed, when you're first starting to menstruate, you meet your feminine power. And then when you are in your menstruation period, so from whenever 12 or 15 until, up until 50 or 52, I guess is the average age of menopause, you practice that feminine power and you practice becoming that true self. And then when you move into menopause, you become that female, like and I just love that. Just fills me with goosebumps for what's to come, and looking at, that next stage of our life with excitement and anticipation instead of dread and sort of a suck it up, we have to deal with these awful symptoms. And your book really speaks to that.
And I think that is actually something that I really want to focus on with Periwinkle as well, is not just getting through, quote unquote, this stage of perimenopause. I think I would love to see as many women thrive in it as possible. And then, as you said, once we get onto the other side of perimenopause and we're heading into menopause, I want us to be excited about that. There's a lot, I think, in our culture that talks about women becoming invisible as we age, and it's harder to have a career, and certainly we're not in Hollywood films the way men can often be, and I don't think it has to be that way. In fact, one of the things that I've been doing during this stage of life is I'm really, really spending so much time and energy in my own subconscious and conscious, because what I have noticed over the last couple of years is there's so many messages that we get as women that don't validate our self-worth or the value that we bring to society. And I'm finding that I need to meditate more. I need to do hypnosis and affirmations and journaling, almost to rid myself of the messages that I'm hearing about this time of life being so difficult and all of the horrible things that are, awaiting me. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm so happy. Like, I've managed, to manage this perimenopause stuff as well as I possibly could. Got this great guide out into the universe. I'm excited about working with women and helping them through the stage of life. Why would I be miserable? I don't understand it. So, for anyone out there who themselves is like battling some of the messages that they're hearing, I know for myself, going inward and really focusing on my subconscious and my conscious has helped enormously. And I feel like I deserve that. I don't need to hear all of these negative messages all the time. It feels a little bit, self-indulgent when I hop on my couch at around 3 o'clock to do some affirmations.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, I feel wonderful. So I'm going to keep on doing it.
So I'm going to encourage you to. I mean, that is my jam. I am a cognitive-based mindfulness coach. So to be aware of what we're thinking about, because it is what we think about drives how we feel, which then leads to the actions we take, which directly create the results we have in our life. So if we think we can, we can. If we think we can have an amazing second half of life, we can. If we think it's going to be miserable and awful, it will be. It is what we focus on expands. We can look out one side and we can find people on Instagram who are saying aging is awful. It's horrendous. Everyone needs to get facelifts and 700 other things, whatever, like it's so bad and there's no chance for us in jobs. Or we can look out the other way and we can see people who are speaking. Mel Robbins, who says she's just published her second New York Times bestseller past age 50. There are so many people and so many places to look, and I'm all in on that. And I just heard of 2 recent studies, one which says the happiest women in the world are over 65. Like, wow. I'm sorry, not the world, in the US, like are over the age of 65, because they just they're living their lives more and they're just in it. And so we need more, like we can find, if we want to look for it, we can find it. That was reported on Glennon Doyle's podcast. So that was not just something Susie got out of wherever. And then another, we can find the studies that show us life sucks and it's awful and everything goes downhill. And then another study I read is that sex keeps getting better as we age, that it just keeps getting more fulfilling. And women know their bodies better. So they know better what to ask for. And it's no longer this like fumbling in the dark, we're done, and boom, okay, are you happy?
That's great. I love that.
And it's like, why not? Let's look for these things. And I just urge people out there to, exactly as you say, like the more mindful we are and aware we are of what stories we're telling ourselves and what maybe we see as the aging and the discomfort around us, because that definitely gets more of the social media, the more we're going to believe that and buy into that and feel dread about our future. And that's never a life I'm going to encourage people to live. And there is the other side. We just need to look for it, because it is more hidden and like, but it's out there. So let's go find and follow those women, get on Hello Periwinkle, get this book. You have so many, you end it with uplifting messages of hope and inspiration. There are so many more menopause and menopause in the, like if you Google menopause in the podcast app or on social media, there's so many people out there more now than 3 years ago, because we are a vast amount of, what did you say, 1 billion?
So there'll be 1 billion women who will have gone through perimenopause by 2025. So we're in 2022 now. So in 3 years from now, 1 billion women. Yeah, we just need to use our voices. We need to ask for what we want. We need to speak up. We need to start being more like the UK. And it's like, where's our estrogen? Right. Where are our clinicians? Where's the healthcare industry and field in terms of meeting our needs? I worry that there's so much that we don't know about cognition and hormones. And if you look at the data around Alzheimer's, women tend to get Alzheimer's more than men. Dementia is the same. I really do think that we need to invest more in figuring out why. What is the hormone link there, and what can we be doing in healthcare to ensure that women are living, the best of their lives in the second half of their lives with their cognition intact. So got a lot of work ahead of us.
Well, and we need to speak up and we need to ask for it. And I know, there are 2 things that I've heard lead to that increase in dementia in women is lack of sleep. And so that can be in the childbearing age years, but that also is now. So for us to prioritize sleep, and even if we're up at 3 a.m. to still lie there, tell yourself your body's still resting. Right. And then the other one is stress. Just this rushing woman syndrome that we have to keep going. So speaking to your point of nourishing and soothing is really, that's what we need to do.
I'll add one other thing to that. I have noticed as I've been in perimenopause that my ability to drink alcohol has decreased significantly, which I think is actually interesting. I think my body is sending me a message that this is actually not a good thing to nourish my body with. And I'm watching that happen at the same time that I am watching the alcohol industry flood women with messages around mommy wine culture. And I mean, basically just wine all the time. And it worries me, Susie. It does. I think, I look back to 50 years ago with the smoking and tobacco industry, and it's starting to feel a little bit like that to myself. I'm wondering, why is it okay for all of us to be hearing how wonderful alcohol is constantly, when actually it's not great for our brains, it's not great for our livers, and it's definitely not great for our hormones. I'm not suggesting that everybody stop drinking. That's unrealistic, and it's not really any of my business. But I will say for myself, I've really had to take a second look and think about, okay, what is this impact? What does alcohol do on my hormones? And for me, being estrogen dominant and being low in testosterone, it doesn't do anything good. So if you're out there and you're struggling with either of those issues, it may be time to look at alcohol.
Yeah, I listeners of this show who've gotten all the episodes know that I very much encourage them to look at their relationship with alcohol. I haven't drinking since December of 2 years ago, because I just suddenly was like, what is this doing for me? Again, loving food that loves me back, and telling myself that, oh, this wine is good for me, even though I would undoubtedly get into an argument with my husband, or I would sleep less, well, I would have more brain fog. And there is a lot of industry marketing out there right now for that wine mommy culture. And I have other podcasts I can link in here. I've been on sobriety shows. It is something definitely for people to look at. It is something that people will be on their own journey with. So it is, I hear you that you're not saying to not do it or to stop all in, together. But I do think, like anything else, that, if we're putting it in our body, let's be aware of its real effects. There's a lot of confusion I hear people speak about, even, my own clients. They're like, I don't know if it's the alcohol, but I feel sort of fuzzy in the morning. And it's like, we need to, confusion is not our friend. It is the alcohol. It is, it causes 13 cancers. It is a poison. It's ethanol. And there was so funny that we have this one study of, hormone replacement therapy, and we're all like, oh no, let's not do that. Yet there are like thousands of studies showing how alcohol is just really traumatic to our system, cancer causing, and we are, because there's so much money behind the alcohol industry, we are sort of blinded from that. So yes, I think everyone is in their, it is in their best interest to look at, their relationship with alcohol for sure, and their relationship with everything else that you mentioned in this book, and the sleep and the exercise and the eating, and there's so much goodness. So I am so grateful that you came today on the show and can shine this message out. Where do you spend most of your time on social media if listeners want to hang out with Jen?
Yeah, please join us over at We Are Periwinkle on Instagram and on Facebook. We have a really great community there. It's growing, and I'd love to see anyone who'd like to join us.
Okay. And I know your Instagram is super fun. So I was like waiting. If you were like, I spend all my time on LinkedIn, I'd be like, oh my gosh, what am I missing? Because Instagram is so fun.
No, Instagram and Facebook is where we're hanging out.
Okay. I will check it out, and I will include your link to 25% off this beauty, because this is one you want to get, and you can have a little race with me to see if you put even more stickies in than I do.
I love it.
Thank you for coming today,
Jen. Thank you so much,
Jen.
Susie. It was great to talk with you.
So wonderful.